And that's why I think, and I applaud Ken and Shakar and everybody with the LA Las Vegas section in putting this together, because it's important that we stay connected. It's important that we keep making progress, even given the situation. And I think with today's technology, we can keep things going pretty well. One of the first things we did as an institute from a national perspective was to let people know how important the aerospace and defense industry is to the U.S. economy. It is, if you'll go to the next slide, Ken, please, or my only slide, actually. We put out a press release that got the potential of 50 to 75 million people seeing it. It was all part of being a voice from the industry perspective out there to help the policymakers understand the value of taking care or helping bridge the aerospace and defense industry through this problem. And we put this together. We actually had this data already. We've been using it in several forms. It actually forms the basis for a lot of our talking points with CVD and other places. But the highlight here, and we set this graphic out along with the press release, is that fundamentally our industry supports about 2.5 million jobs, 17,000 suppliers. That results in about $237 billion in wages and about $928 billion in economic output each year. And we didn't get into the specifics or one company or what one company needed versus another. This was meant more to raise the level of awareness across the industry, or to the policymakers, as to the value of the industry. We also made sure that the White House, Hill staff, and others got the press release explicitly, so that they didn't have to go look for it, that they had it available to them. And hopefully it helped. We think it did, and did get some notes back from the White House thanking us for putting the press release together and getting it out. So we felt like it was important to do this, particularly as there was all of the policy discussions in Washington about what to do for the future. And now that we have the bill in place, hopefully things will get distributed and we'll keep things running the way they need to be, and we can bridge through this. What I think, and a lot of people think, is that is a temporary situation. There's another part of this that we have been pushing on, and that is, even though this is a temporary situation, we want to be in a good position when we come out of this for the industry to hit restart and to get back up to where it was. With the kind of contribution that the aerospace and defense makes to the economy, it's going to be crucial that we get that the aerospace and defense industry is available and ready to help build things up to its pre-crisis momentum and get things growing back to the future like they were before we had to go through this situation. So this is, we're working the short term, but we're also keeping our eyes on the long term in order to make sure that once we come through this, we're able to regain the momentum and get back on the growth path that the whole industry was on. We're looking for, and you guys are actually the first example, like I've said, of creative solutions to help connect our members with the decision makers across the industry. We had an interesting example, had a good opportunity. On Thursday, we were honored to have the Department of Defense. They asked AIAA to provide an opportunity to connect corporate members with the DoD Office of Developmental Test Evaluation and Prototyping. That's in the DoD research and engineering world. And we had over 70 attendees for that. Different companies getting to hear directly from Timothy Dare at the Department of Defense on what they needed for their investment. So this is an example of how we were working to keep the ball moving. Yes, we had to figure out how to do a Zoom meeting real quick. And yes, we had to figure out how to make this work. And we even we pulled all the employees into a test the day before, just to make sure we were able to handle the load. And we learned a few things out of that test. And it turned out that on Thursday, we had a very successful discussion with Tim Dare and everyone that participated. And we're looking for more of those events. We have conversations going on several fronts to participate and be part of some of these forums remotely so that we can continue this conversation. We even had discussions with NASA yesterday about how we can help them get the word out on a few things. And so you'll be seeing some of that as we go through. Now, from an AIAA, let me switch gears a little bit and go to an AIAA focused discussion for a minute. You've probably noticed that we are redoing the schedule. We just had to do that. We will make a decision in mid-May on how to pursue, or no later than mid-May, we'll be making a decision on how to proceed with Aviation 2020. That's currently scheduled for Reno. We're still on that track. However, we're keeping a close eye, as everyone is, on the situation so that we know what to do or make some decisions along the way. We have rescheduled the gala and the fellows dinner from the May timeframe. We have rescheduled those for July 16th and 17th. That hasn't been formally announced yet, but it's pretty close. I think we've been putting some of that out through a couple of different channels, so you'll start to hear that. We are maintaining all of our spring meetings in virtual format. Those spring meetings include the Joint Council of Directors and Board of Trustees meeting, the Board of Trustees meeting, the AIAA Foundation Board meeting. All of that is staying on track. We're just going to do it virtually as opposed to in person over in Crystal City. So you will see changes coming on that front. There is a link I know we've put out in several places that you can get to off the AIAA homepage. It's aiaaa.org/coronavirus is a place to keep up with what's changed and how things are changing and what the upcoming dates will be. And we put that on the homepage to keep everybody updated. Now, as we talk about this, and back to Ken and Shikar's points, I think earlier on, is we're working to keep things moving, bridge through this, and focus on the future. There is a lot to look forward to. It's going to be delayed a little bit. There will be some hiccups along the way, but fundamentally, the work on hypersonics still continues in the DoD arena. The work on supersonic commercial transport still proceeds. Electric aircraft is still being worked, and you see that more and more every day. You see the private enterprise space development, space exploration. NASA is still on track, as we understand it, to make some key announcements on the Artemis program over the next few weeks. So the activity is still ongoing. It's just in a little bit different form than probably what we're used to. We are cognizant of the fact that there's a gap right now or a situation that we're having to work through. But in the end, when we come out of this, it appears to us that a lot of the activity will still keep going on or get restarted, and we'll work to regain that momentum. As this continued, all the teams are working toward their objectives. I checked, I was talking to some of my NASA cohorts yesterday, and they're still on track for lander announcements and other things. So that you'll see that coming soon. Department of Defense is still going. Timothy Dare still is on his track for making identifying through his RFI and other means what investments he needs to make. So lots of activity going on. just probably not at the pace we had hoped at this time, but I think everybody's working through it. Granted, the commercial airline industry, things like that are working through their problems, but you know, I even got a general email today that the United Airlines CEO sent out to everyone, basically saying, hey, we recognize we're working through the problem. We recognize our passenger load has dropped off, but we're reconfiguring our aircraft and our schedule to help deliver supplies to where they're needed around the country and around the world, and also get U.S. citizens back into the country. So, you know, you see things across the country where people are chipping in and helping solve the problem, and it's, you know, the American ingenuity and the American ability to handle the challenges certainly coming to the fore. AIAA, we're hosting town meetings like this one. Thank you for doing it again. We are going to be doing, you will see us next week, we will be having similar discussions via Zoom and other methodologies with the student branches, the integration groups, the technical activities division, the regions and sections. We're going to be reaching out to everyone and actually hosting some webinars for the young professionals at their request. For example, we have one in the works where Sandy Magnus is going to do a webinar for the young professionals and anyone else who would like to join about living and working in isolation based on her experience on space station. So, you know, we're taking advantage of that, staying connected with our membership, and hopefully continue to build that. Now, you know, as we also, one of the things I'd like to encourage as everyone's working from home and working in this new environment, please recognize that AIAA is here to help you stay connected to the community, even learn new skills as possible with our online activity. The Engage platform, etc., is all available, and we're working very hard to keep it up and running and even tune it up and make it better, so that the online offerings, all of the wealth of research in the Aerospace Research Central, or ARC, and all those other resources are readily available to you. We've been working hard with people, recognizing that coming in to ARC from home computers, home IP addresses versus company IP addresses, and what that means for subscription rates and all that. Dominiac and team are all working through that. So just be patient. As you have an issue, just let us know, and we'll work through it. So we are trying to keep things, we are working hard to keep things going. The team's doing a great job. And I heard some talk from Shakar about what can be done for K-12 students. We have the AIAA.org/students@home for K through 12 students. It's a great opportunity, and we're pushing that out to the educator associates and everyone that we can find to say, hey, here's content, here's ideas, here are things you can do with the students in order to help work through the situation, help the young people learn, help them get excited about aerospace and the future in aerospace, and give mom and dad a little bit of a peace of mind as well. So probably the best thing for me to do is to just kind of stop there and see if there are any questions, and just happy to have whatever conversation, ideas, whatever you might have. But, you know, I think the bottom line from the AIAA National Office Headquarters is we're working through the situation. We'll get through it, and we're working to do everything we can to position ourselves and be ready for the restart and the ramp up as soon as we can do it. So Ken, Shakar, others, any questions, anything you guys want to talk about? Happy to do it.
Dan, I definitely have a question for you. Some of us were discussing that this downturn may actually AAA might make a loss due to all these cancellations and stuff. Are we getting any part of stimulus funds from the government?
So that's an interesting question, Shakar. A couple of things. The American Society of American Society of Associations. Yes, there is such a thing. Took a run at that. In the stimulus bill, there isn't anything per se for us that we can grab a hold of, except we are looking at the possibility of how the small business loans are being done to see if that applies. We are going through the law to see if it applies. Now, so I don't know that the stimulus bill will help us much. I will say this. From a financial perspective, FY20 is certainly not going to look like what we had planned. And there will be some negative, some financial impacts. We don't know how all this is playing out right now. We have made some decisions here in the first couple of weeks to put some things on hold, to put on hold what we can, so that we maintain as much financial flexibility as we can for the future, depending upon how the situation works out. That being said, we are lucky enough in the sense that we're lucky and we're not. Given the way our cash flow works through the course of the year, we're in the time of the year where luckily this thing didn't hit us too bad because we didn't have big cancellations. Now we're coming up on the Aviation 2020 decision in the mid-May timeframe, or maybe even a little earlier. That is a pure cancellation of Aviation would be a big hit financially. We are looking at what our other options are in terms of, can we do it virtually, do it partially virtual? Well, let me rephrase it. I got to be very careful with the words. We're looking at adding a virtual capability to Aviation. We will also probably be looking at adding a virtual capability to P&E, and we're also looking at adding a virtual capability to Ascend, so that we can mitigate the risk out there if there is any, depending upon how well the situation gets worked out between now and November. So we are trying to work through that, and we'll just have to see what it's going to be. But I think the good news is that from a financial perspective, is that the Institute has a healthy portfolio, relatively speaking, given what's happened to the markets lately. And we have been carrying a reserve for exactly these kinds of times. And we are doing everything we can to manage that, mitigate the impact where we can financially, and again, be ready for the restart and the growth coming out of it. That was a long-winded answer, Shakar, but hopefully I
Thank you.
got it. Let's see, I see there's a question from Gus. Dan, how far into the year is AIAA putting conference and activities on hold? Really good question, Gus. We're taking it step by step, frankly. We've basically canceled or rescheduled or gone to virtual on everything through May. And we are now looking at the June timeframe and what happens there, June and out. Our big concerns right now are the 3 forums, and those again are Aviation, P&E, and Ascend. And we're working on planning for those right now. And all I can tell you right now is stay tuned, because as soon as we have an idea of what the best option is, we'll be getting and make a decision. We'll be getting that word out to everyone. And Gus also asked another good question. Would we consider putting all the learning and training lectures held at conference on video? That is something we're trying to figure out how to do, Gus, and what we need to do to be able to do at least that in a partial mode. Again, we'll have to figure out what this looks like. But I think it's certainly something that's on the table that we're considering and trying to figure out how we can do it in order to help with the requirement that we still have the publishing that people need to do for various reasons, and also being able to get to keep the knowledge transfer and those other things going on. We think that's something that's certainly a set of options we're taking a look at. Let's see, any other questions? Nothing on the chat or in the Q&A section. Wow, this is great. We have 51 people. Boy, Marty, Ken, and Shakar, you guys do great work.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Ken, I have a question for you, and probably I think for everyone. Are you recording this session for putting
Yes.
online?
It's being recorded now.
So
Yeah,
anyone on the call, if you have any objection about certain portions of video, you will have to just email Ken about editing out some part of the portion of your talk. But otherwise, we consider this as a public event, and we're going to upload the entire video on our website and possibly on YouTube. So just so you know.
Okay.
I think Dan already spoke about conferences. Looking like he hasn't mentioned anything about the P&E and Ascend. Most likely they're going to continue as the way it is, but we might have some additional feedback from Nathan. Nathan is the executive we hired, AIAA hired for running the Ascent. So I asked him to briefly talk about Ascent, P&E, and any other conferences. So if you want to add anything, Nathan, more than what Dan mentioned, please go ahead.
Thank you, and hey, hi everybody. It's great to be here, and thank you for the invitation. I also invited a colleague, Sam McGill, who actually is more of an expert on P&E and aviation than I am. And so I'd like to invite her to start off just by reiterating some of the points that Dan made and talking specifically about plans for those events, and then I'll get into Ascend after that.
Great, thank you, Nathan. I hope everyone can hear me okay. Yeah, thanks for including me here the last few minutes. I think Dan really hit on the current situation of how we're exploring our upcoming forums. What I can share with you is sort of an update on the planning thus far. So Aviation, Reno, which is in close to your area, so we do hope very much to be in Reno in June. Some of the top areas, if you're interested, let's see, Aviation, hold on, let me look at my notes here. Really focusing on, hold on just a second. I had a few notes, and let me just pull those up quickly. So technically we're looking at June 15th through the 19th in Reno, as I said, with an overall theme, we get you here, there, and now everywhere. So a fun little play on a Dr. Seuss theme regarding of how aviation is key to our society. And basically the daily themes, the executive steering committee try to brainstorm on things that are impactful for the community at the time. Life cycle integration, NASA, aeronautics, that division will be doing a day-long event almost, where we'll have Bridenstine kick it off, and then Bob Pierce, the Associate Administrator for Aeronautics, and they'll review some of their top programs in that area. Faster is a key theme throughout our entire industry right now, and Aerion Supersonics is local, so Tom Weiss will kick off that day. And also, of course, looking at commercial mobility and sort of a vision of global mobility, which will include your urban air mobility piece as well. So some executives that will be sharing as keynotes, Jeanette Ramos, Walt Odisho, some VPs of manufacturing, senior VP and VP of manufacturing at Boeing. And as I said, Jim Bridenstine, Tom Weiss, and Grazia Vittandini, who's the CTO of Airbus. So those are a few of the keynotes that have been confirmed for aviation. And that's where the planning is right now. We're continuing to update the website as we get further confirmation for Form 360s and so forth. If I move on to propulsion and energy in August, and that would be in New Orleans. So right now looking the 24th to the 26th and trying to elevate that New Orleans community that we would be participating in is trumpeting the future of propulsion and energy in the Big Easy. And they're looking at space sustainability, you know, where Dan hit on a few of those things, NASA, as well as the satellite community and how propulsion and energy sustainability is playing a role in LEO and beyond. Connectivity, that's a large piece as well, intelligent systems. And many of you may be familiar that we have partnered with IEEE to do an electric aircraft technology symposium, and that is coupled with the P&E week. So they will overlap on Wednesday with the EATS symposium continuing through the end of the week. So P&E would be Monday through Wednesday, and then Wednesday through Friday would be the EATS. And Robert, some keynotes that have been confirmed, Robert Lightfoot with Marla Perez, the new director of NASA Glenn, Wanda Segor, and Bob Pierce. So, and again, we're trying to update those areas and happy to answer any questions regarding P&E as well. We're already looking at SciTech 2021. I know Dan didn't hit on that, but that falls in my purview as well. Just to let you know, the overall theme has been discussed and the call for papers is open, accelerating innovation through diversity in aerospace. So we're looking at teams, sectors, design cycles, perspectives, different technologies, how we're engaging much more broadly in the aerospace community than perhaps traditionally. I think that'll be very interesting, and I think it'll be very interesting to talk about this situation at SciTech. So keep that in mind as well, that the Executive Steering Committee is already on board to figure out how they can share sort of a state of the industry at that time in January. So we want to be leading that charge and being ready to be that platform to help the community talk about where we are and what challenges perhaps this is proposed that we can help put back together and maybe make better. I think Dan hit on that too. We're being forced to look at some technologies and things that were sort of on the back burner, but now they're on the front burner. And hopefully we will be leading the community in those areas. I see a few chats. Happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Sam.
Okay, I think that's it. And then, yeah, Nathan, I'll let you talk about Ascend.
Before we move on to Ascend, Dan, there's a question aviation related from Gus on the Q&A panel. So if you want to take that one really quickly, then we can all go to space together. You're on mute, Dan.
You're talking about the question about the restart?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was typing an answer for that, but I'll just do it better this way. It's easier. I think Washington, D.C. discussions, I think that's going to, what happens with the restart is going to be really on the aircraft side, commercial aircraft side, is really going to be driven by the market forces. I think from a defense perspective, everybody's going to try to ramp back up as much as they can. I think they're actually trying to keep it going as much as they can right now. I've heard some of that kind of discussion in some of the, at least on the space side, with a few things. Gus also asked about SLS and restart, and I think that one's an interesting one because I've been watching that a little bit in the sense that some of the NASA centers are having to go to lockdown because of COVID cases showing up on center. The contractors are still trying to keep the work going where they can, and they're working that daily, hourly with the agency. So I know people are trying to keep it going as much as they can. I think the restart's all going to be dependent upon, at least on the commercial side, what the market forces do. I think the government funded projects, everybody's trying to keep them going as much as possible and hit the ground and then be able to ramp back up if needed coming out. But I think people are, I see a lot of activity of people trying to keep the ball moving. to continue making as much progress as possible. So hopefully that will all continue.
Thanks, Dan. So I am going to take over for talking about Ascend. I'm literally wearing my Ascend cap to go through this. I'm the program officer for Ascend at AIAA headquarters, and so the buck stops here, so to speak, with anything related to Ascend. If you should be able to see my screen now, where I've pulled up the Ascend website. It's important to notice that Ascend has its own domain, so it's not on the AIAA.org website. It actually has ascend.events as its own domain. As Dan mentioned, we're on track to keep moving with Ascend for November in Las Vegas, Nevada, 16 to 18 November specifically. We are continuing to build the content, and there are some specific asks that I have for you. So I thought the best thing to do would be to walk you through the website to give you sort of a quick update. So if you go to ascend.events, you're able to toggle through these drop-down menus. First thing to notice is that the Guiding Coalition has expanded by a number of members. So I'll just pull you through the leadership team really quickly. But we've added representation from.
Hey, Nathan,
yes,
your screen's not showing up, at least not here. I'm seeing a team meeting invitation.
That's not good.
Yeah, I see also Toby Jackson team meeting.
That's not good. Do you see it now?
There you go.
Yeah,
you
there
got
you
it.
go. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Sorry about the mix up there. So again, ascend.events is its own domain. You can see these drop-down menus that come at the top. The first thing we'll take a quick look at is in the About section under the Guiding Coalition. We just recently added representation for a couple of other of our major partners, so I'll just scroll down the list. We added Thomas Zerbuchen from NASA. Bobby Braun moved over to the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Melissa Sampson is now our Ball Aerospace representative, and Robert Kerbeam is representing Northrop Grumman. So we have expanded that leadership team a little bit over the last several weeks. The next thing to look at is that the program is starting to come together in a broad sketch. So if you go to the experience drop-down and pull up the program, you can see the layout of each day starting to come into focus. Monday the 16th, we'll focus on near-term commercialization of space, where we have a keynote speaker from the investment community. Tuesday the 17th, we're looking at long-term human exploration, and some of the sessions that we're building are down below. But that's where Administrator Bridenstine is slated to be our keynote speaker. And then on Wednesday the 18th, we'll be looking at national security and policy. We are developing keynote speakers from industry, including Marilyn Houston from Lockheed Martin and from the Department of Defense and the Secretary of the Air Force Office. So those will be announced as soon as they can be confirmed. And so that's generally where you'll find areas or the information about the sessions that are developing. But then there are loads more programming coming up because the call for content, which was slated to be closed on March 17th, was given a blanket extension to this coming Tuesday, March 31st. So if, again, in the experience section, if you drop down, you can look at the call for content. And this is where all of you can still get involved specifically in Ascend. And what we would like you to do is take a look at this page and see how there are some updates that have been added. But there's a view option for this ways to be engaged PDF, which will pull up the 3 different ways that you can help out. One is to volunteer to be a reviewer, and there's a process outlined at the bottom of the page here if you would like to do that. That shows how you can log into the system and become a reviewer for the Ascend content. You can submit your own individual presentations. That's the second row here, where this is your technical papers and your case studies, things that you've typically done at AIAA activities in the past. And then finally, you can also propose new sessions and new ideas through the engagement session proposal section, and that is outlined here. I'm available for any questions you might have on how to manage that system. Really quickly, one last thing is that this will close on Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific. So we ask that you come in and submit an abstract before the closure on Tuesday. When you click through, you'll end up on this login page. This is your AIAA login. If you don't have one already, you'll be prompted to create an account. I'll just use my professional login from the staff and get inside the system. The one key thing I wanted to show how easy it is to become a reviewer, which is one of the main things we need right now, is to go to your name once you're in the system, your general information, and then scroll down the page until you get to the areas of expertise. You can simply highlight within this little framework in here which areas you would like to review papers for, and then add those to your name, and they'll appear down here in this list of your areas of expertise. And so we really would like to encourage everybody in this section to volunteer to help review papers and to go ahead and submit their own abstracts by Tuesday. With that, we are, as Dan mentioned, looking through some ideas about how we can virtualize this event or have contingency plans available in case this national crisis continues all the way through the fall. So we'll be looking into things like that, but in the meantime, we're proceeding with the building of the content as we have planned, and we're not changing course at all. Ascend will be happening in Las Vegas this November. So at this point, I'll stop talking and take any questions that you have about any of these events.
Thank you, Nathan. I have one question actually. Our AIAA website is not very mobile friendly. For example, I wanted to review a paper that was submitted to PNE that was sent to me for review, and I had so much challenge just to navigate to the site. So I'm guessing that you actually are showing are you showing the mobile website, or is it through the computer? And how friendly is the mobile website?
So I'm showing the desktop version of the Ascend website, which is optimized for mobile phone access. However, if you're talking about the review of papers inside the ScholarOne system, that's a separate website and a separate tool altogether, which has limited availability to be used on a mobile phone. So those are separate issues. The AIAA.org website and the ascend.events websites should be relatively accessible from your phone, but the actual work of reviewing abstracts in ScholarOne is a more challenging thing to do from your phone.
Thank you. Anybody else has a question for Nathan? If not, we thank Nathan for providing the update, and we'll move on to the next speaker. We have John Rose from Boeing. He also is a Region 6 Director. I asked him to provide update on Region 6 as well as commercial aerospace sector. John?
Thanks, Shakar. So yeah, I'm John Rose. I'm the Region 6 Director, so the 9 Western states. I do want to make a little disclaimer that while I am an employee of Boeing, I am not speaking on behalf of any company or any specific segment. It's just kind of an AIAA/personal perspective on kind of what's going on, since we still are really early on in understanding how this is going to impact everybody. The long-term implications, as Dan mentioned, they're still going to have to play out. And what we need to remember is that at the end of the day, this really is impacting a lot of people as well. There's a lot of discussion around company support and industry support, but you know, it's the people that make all those things happen. And so we need to be cognizant of that as we think about talking about airlines possibly not recovering or sectors that are struggling. But it really comes down to people at the end of the day. Ken, do you want to go to my next slide? There we go, thanks. So there's a lot of ways to look at how the aerospace industry is being impacted. And I'm just looking from the commercial standpoint, because I know we have defense on there as well. So certainly when we look at the aircraft manufacturers, Airbus, Boeing, Embraer, Bombardier, other companies around the world that are really the manufacturers, when we think of you know, when the administration talks about bailing out Boeing or the airlines, whoop, there you go. The suppliers, they're part of the flow. You know, Spirit, Hexcel, CFM makes engines, Honeywell. There's a lot of big companies that also are suppliers to other companies. And so to say that, you know, Honeywell has all of its programs impacted that it's responsible for, but then it's also a supplier of a lot of things. So all those supply chains have been stretched and tested recently to understand, you know, how are they going to be able to respond to what's going on here? Spirit was already hit hard by the challenges presented with the 737 MAX program issues that Boeing was experiencing. Hexcel provides a lot of the composite materials, and so if they're not building fuselages, then they're not providing material. So there's a trickle down effect that is going to be experienced by the different levels as we go and see how this all plays out over the next few weeks or months. The airlines are certainly experiencing a huge impact to their business. And some of them have announced large groundings, up to 85% of their fleet being grounded because they can't fly, either because of the travel restrictions or their loads are so light. But as Dan mentioned, a lot of them are stepping up to still be able to ferry their planes to be able to take supplies, and in some cases doctors and other people that are necessary to support the battling of the COVID that's going on right now. So, but this is certainly something that some of these airlines may not be able to recover from a financial standpoint. And that's going to play out over the year as we see what happens to additional stimulus funding, whether it's from the US, whether it's from other countries. A lot of these airlines are also tied to their governments, and so there may be some financial stimulus that comes through from other countries as well. But overall, this is still starting to evolve. The actual impacts are going to be felt weeks or months down the road as we start to see how long people and companies have to shut down and stand down. From a Boeing perspective right now, we've shuttered most of our sites. It's critical people only. Obviously, up in the Puget Sound area, we've stopped production of aircraft for at least 2 weeks. And while that is our commercial area, that also does impact our commercial derivative aircraft. So while we're not building 767s and 737s, we're also not building tankers. We're not building KC-46 tankers. We're not building P-8 sub-hunters right now as well. So the implications for this are far and wide across a multitude of areas. And as you continue to go down that list of kind of where, start to look at more of the adjacencies, the airports are certainly impacted. LAX, Jackson, Hartsfield Jackson, and other ones internationally are not having all the revenue come through in terms of they're not seeing the passenger loads, or they're being told to shut down, or they're not having, all the airlines come through. And so there's as the governor of New York was talking about just in general around COVID, right now he has no revenue coming in. He just has expenses. So there's a lot of economic impacts that go beyond just the idea of the airlines or the suppliers being impacted. It's also at the airport level, and then the employees. And that's when I was talking about, this really does at the end of the day get down to being about the people in our industry and the adjacent areas. All the airport workers that are not working because the restaurants are closed, or any of the flight attendants because they've scaled back how many flights, and then the pilots association, all the pilots that are not flying. There are a multitude of levels of people being impacted. And then if you even want to go beyond that, the idea that commercial aviation, as critical as it is to just the commerce and everything else and getting people to business trips, but the adjacent areas, all the hotels that now do not have people coming in and out of the airports like usual, the cabbies, the food distributors that were sending food to the airports or providing cleaning services and things like that. So there are multiple levels of how this has impacted and will continue to impact, because the recovery to this, there's no set plan of how we're going to recover. It's not, there's no playbook already that after 4 weeks, we're going to start to do this and this and this. We still have to see, as the doctors say every day, we have to see how the numbers go. This really is a numbers game in terms of when from the data can we say that it is safe from the standpoint of the people to be able to reinvigorate or restart some of these industries. And it may not be across the board. There may be areas that do not restart at the same pace as others. There may be areas that never fully recover. And so understanding how all this is going to play out is going to be a wait and see as we go through and kind of watch how it all transpires and see what the impacts are, not only at the aircraft manufacturers level, not only at the supplier level, but at the airlines, the airports. And then at the end of the day, really, how many of the employees are able to come back, and how many of the businesses those employees were part of survive. So there's a lot of levels to this when we talk about commercial airlines being in the commercial industry being impacted. It does trickle down quite a bit. Ken, you want to go to the next slide? Let's see. Ken or Shakar, someone, next slide.
Give me 1 second. Let me call Ken.
There we go. So it's been pretty crazy, some of the pictures that have shown up on in the media and the coverage of everything that's going on. Almost never before have we seen the sustained grounding of so many aircraft. I mean, certainly 9/11 was a more recent example in terms of when airlines were just grounded. They had to get them all on the ground, but we obviously came back. But right now we're looking at an unprecedented number of aircrafts around the world that are being grounded, fleets from all different countries, because this is a global pandemic, so we have to look at the fact of what's that going to do. Will all those airplanes get back up in the air from the standpoint of, will the airlines be viable and see the kind of load factors that they need, or will they continue to ground planes? And if you think about that, there's a lot of other economics that go into this beyond the idea of, oh, we're going to be able to get back and recover. Right now, we're seeing an incredibly low price for oil for the airlines to purchase fuel. So do they even need to purchase new airplanes, or can they continue to run the ones that they have very, very cheaply because oil is so low right now? So that's another thing that's going to come back into the understanding of what do the airlines need as they come back up. They may not even need to leverage all the planes that they currently have, much less buy new ones or retire older ones. And so there's going to be a lot of economic considerations that go into coming back. It's not like going to be just flip a switch, oh, let's go back to how we were before. So there's a lot of world factors going on beyond just COVID-19. As I mentioned, oil prices, what is it going to look like? Will there be some countries that are still resistant to allowing foreign travel in because they haven't completely, got it within control in their own borders? So there may not be all the routes that are reestablished. If you look at the picture on the right-hand side, that's Denver International Airport. That is not, some crazy day of the year. That was recently when if you look at Denver, you hardly ever see anything like that, when you're going through TSA. And that's just Denver. It's the same at LAX. It's the same at all the big airports around the world. There's only a trickle of the passenger activity from what we're used to seeing at these large airports. And that again then trickles down through all the levels of, you don't need as many baggage handlers, you don't need as many TSA screeners, you don't need as many, food vendors and stores, if they're even allowed to be open. So those kinds of things we're seeing at the airport level. And at the bottom is a GE plant that's just been idled. There are so many plants that have had to shut down from the standpoint of they're not either able to get the supply chain parts that they need. For a long time, our industry has worked on a just-in-time approach where we keep minimal stock on hand to be able to, throw it onto attach it as it comes on as it's necessary, because we didn't want to pay for all the stock that was and the costs related to that. So we went to a just-in-time approach. So now we're starting to see some of the ramifications of that, is that approach does not allow us to work through much of a backlog of hardware before we're out. And so the amount of traveled work substantially grows of, like, you're only able to build a partial of this aircraft or a partial of that engine or a partial of this system before you run out of parts. And your suppliers, they may be struggling with being able to get people to come into their shops to build more pieces or being able to get it sent over to you in time. So, there's a lot of ways that this has started to impact just the producibility of some of our stuff. I know Dan had mentioned that DoD is still pushing for suppliers and contractors to keep working, and that's true. And they're accelerating funds to do that. On the commercial side, it is a struggle. There's